Carter, and welcome to Crash Course in Georgia History. Today we're talking about land, and more land. From 1732 to 1752, the trustees governed Georgia under the Georgia Charter, which was signed by King George II. Well, we've already discussed why Georgia was founded in our prior video. So you all know the trustees decided to send over the charity colonists, and the trustees guaranteed each of these charity colonists 50 acres. The first colonists that arrived were given a town lot in the grid of plots that made up Savannah. All the town lots were of uniform size, 20 by 30 yards, with houses that were 24 by 16 feet, raised 30 inches from the ground. Each man received his own lot, a garden plot of 5 acres, and his remaining 50 acres in the form of farmland. The uniformity of the settlement can be seen in this image of George Jones' map titled His Majesty's Colony of Georgia in America, View of Savannah from the River. Jones' map depicts Savannah in 1734 when the colonists first arrived in Georgia, before the city grew and expanded. The first settlers were grateful for the layout. Thomas Calston, a magistrate and storekeeper, wrote that his home was beautifully laid out. All towns were laid out this way, and in a letter from Mr. James Oglethorpe to Mr. Vernon Jones, one of the most active trustees, he detailed how the town of Augusta would be laid out, in a grid system very similar to Savannah, with 50 acres set aside for the males of the family. Technically, an individual male colonist could hold up to 500 acres, but most of the charity colonists who arrived were poor, and so this wasn't an option until the wealthier Scottish settlers arrived. The trustees, particularly Oglethorpe, wanted a colony of self-sufficient human farmers. But of course, as time wore on, dun dun dun, the colonists became frustrated with the 500-acre limit. These colonists had noticed how profitable the plantations in South Carolina were, growing rice and indigo, and they wanted in on that deal. But with such small tracts of land, there was no way they could make a profit. They saw plantations as a gateway to economic success and declared that the restrictions on the size of individual landholdings were a sure path to poverty. This caused the colonists to petition the trustees to be allowed to own larger tracts of land. Of course, selling and distributing the land was all up to the government under the trustees. Oglethorpe signed the Treaty of Coletta with the Creek Indians in 1739, which stated that no other nation have a right to any of the said land. It must therefore mean the lands they, the Indians, have not granted to the trustees in the subsequent. They will not suffer them or any other persons excepting trustees, which in modern-day English translates to the Creek Indians promising not to give the land to any other nation or anybody else but the trustees. The Georgians were also upset because they wanted to own land in fee simple, meaning they wanted to be able to will or sell the land to anybody they pleased. Now, the trustees had created a system in which they had control of the lands. According to a document written by the trustees titled Rules for 1735, all lots are granted in tail male and descend to the heirs male of their bodies forever, and in case of failure of issue male revert to the trust, which in today's speak means that unless the charity colonists purchased the 50 acres they had been given by the trustees could take away this land if there was not a male heir when the family patriarch died. So I think this kind of sucks for women who had worked hard to help cultivate the land and had built a home there too. Also in the document, the trustees said that no person can alienate his land or any part or any term, estate, or interest therein to any other person or persons. So nobody can sell or give their land to anybody else without the permission of the government under the trustees. And what I found to be the worst part of this document was that it said if any of the land so granted should not be cultivated, planted, cleared, improved, or fenced as aforesaid, shall belong to the trust, and the grant as to such parts shall be void. Which means if you don't use the trust as the land wants you to, so if you don't plant the exact number of mulberry trees, they're going to take the land away from you after all your hard work. As I mentioned, the colonists were required to plant 100 white mulberry trees for every 10 acres of land cleared. And these trees had to be cultivated in 10 years. This may not seem like a problem until you realize that Georgia does not provide the proper environment for silkworms to live, because the weather is kind of bipolar. It's time for the open letter. These are some quotes from Patrick Taillefer's letter entitled A True and Historical Narrative of the Colony of Georgia. Patrick Telford was a member of the group called the Malcontents that formed from colonists that had issues with the government's restrictions. Let's see, the opening says, "No wonder then that great numbers of poor subjects who lay under a cloud of misfortunes embrace the opportunity of once more tasting liberty and happiness. But how much they were all disappointed." Ooh, sounds like they're bitter. This should be good. All right, let's keep going. Telford says, "In the first place, there is an excessive quit rent laid upon the land, being a great deal more than His Majesty's subjects and the other British colonies pay vis. 20 shillings sterling for every 100 acres to be paid yearly, and if it or any part thereof should be behind and unpaid by the space of 6 calendar months next after any day of payment, on which the same became due, then the land was fortified and returned to the trustees, as it likewise did upon failure in any of the following conditions." What does this mean? Well, a quit rent is a land tax that's imposed on a freeholder or a land that's been leased by a higher power, which would in this case be the trustees. So it looks like these colonists think the tax is too high, especially compared to the tax in the other British colonies. Plus, if the tax wasn't paid within 6 months of the payment date, the trustees would take away your land. Not to mention that they would also take away your land if you didn't plant what they wanted you to plant or met their conditions. Let's see what's next. "If the person holding the land should die without issue male, or his heirs at any time should die without issue male, that in that case likewise, the whole land was fortified and reverted to the trustees, and if any part or parcel of any of the 500-acre tracts should remain not cultivated, cleared, planted, and improved after the space of 18 years, such part to return to the trustees. These were the chief restrictions in all the grants of lands, which appeared very hard even to strangers, who had not yet felt them." It looks like Taillefer's letter has reiterated the points of the colonists were mad that their land would be taken away, as if the issue male or patriarch of the family who the land was given to died without a male heir. Also, once again, it brought up that all of the land, even if a colonist owned 500 acres, must be cultivated, and that it could be hard depending on the quality of the land. After all, it's kind of hard to grow stuff in Georgia red clay. It showed that the colonists voiced their grievances over land restrictions, which caused tensions between the trustees, who had set ideals for utopian society, and the Georgians, who were focused on becoming economically successful. Once again, these problems link back to issues within Georgia's trust government. Thanks for watching. See you next time.